Greetings, folkaroos. It's Haley, and welcome back, finally, to another video. This one I'm pretty excited for because this is a little expansion idea that I had on my history of chess, like Haley's History of Chess series, and I'm calling it Where Are They Now? So, over the course of my chess career, I've had games that were very significant in one way or another that I remember a while after I play them. And this is one of those games. And I played it against this guy named Rudy Monti about 2 years ago. Um, this game I refer to as the April 14th, 2022 Immortal game, because I played it on the morning of April 14th, 2022. And I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything more. It was a crazy, crazy game. And the point of this series is to see where old Rudy Monti is nowadays, 2.5 years after this game was played. So, without further ado, let's hop right into it. And I started off this game on the white pieces, and the story behind this game was that I woke up early on this day for some reason, and before my class, I decided to hop on chess.com and play a game. I got matched up against this guy. I was on the white pieces, and we got into Spanish game. This is pretty much exclusively what I played back then. Back in 2022, in my first year of college, I pretty much played nothing but the Spanish game with the white pieces, which is putting the bishop on b5. There's like a gazillion variations that can happen here, which I'm not going to go through all because I went through a lot of them in another video if I can remember correctly. But he played d6, which is an extremely passive way to go about this opening. The idea basically is just to block the pin with the bishop and then develop really, really compactly. That's the kind of position that black is looking for here. So C3 is the common move, like the meta move to play against this because it accomplishes two things at the same time. I didn't know this when I played this move, by the way. I just kind of was like, oh, this is what people tell me is the best move to play here, so I play it. But now I understand why. The purpose of this move is twofold. One, it is to prepare a break in the center with pawn to d4, guarded by this pawn, and two, it is to serve as a restriction against that knight when the bishop arrives on d7. So the bishop goes to d7, and this knight is still restricted. It can't really jump in any tactical way whatsoever that would create a threat on this bishop. Castles, and we get a6 here. My opponent's basically asking, are you going to take? Are you going to go back to c4? Are you going to go back to a4 and rotate around here? What's your plan with the bishop? You might even want to go back to e2. I decide to go to a4, right? And he could push the pawn to b5, but that's a little this is a little much. The computer thinks it's a little much to be doing something like that because you still have to contend with this d4 push and you've done nothing but overextend your queen side. And he didn't do that. Instead, he played the main move, which is this knight f6 move. And the idea, of course, is to target the center. Now, white in the Ruy Lopez doesn't always have to defend this pawn. White could just play d4, and this is actually sometimes played. Just giving up this pawn, play rook e1, take on c6, and then win this pawn back on e5. This is a bit sloppy, and I don't like to play this. I just go for the early rook e1. I don't even want to bother with that. I just go rook e1, I'm going to go d4, knight d2, and we're just going to go from there. And at any point, I'm expecting b5. At any point, I'm expecting bishop e7 and castles. This is still within territory that I know now and even knew back then. You may be asking, why is this game your immortal game? We haven't even got to the good part yet, believe me. h6. And now is the time I play d4 because my center pawns are both sufficiently guarded. Queen to e7. Now, this is a very strange move by him here. I think his idea is to take and then have this double attacked, but it's never a good idea to have your king in the middle and then open up the center, especially when there's a rook there. So nowadays, if this was played against me, I would not even fret for a single second. I would just go knight b to d2, and if he took, I'm protected. I would just take, and then either take back or even e5 is a good move here because this sets up a lot of tactical opportunities against that queen, right? Take, take. and you just win the queen, right? Like, it's dangerous for black. But after queen e7, I do a little bit of an inaccuracy, which is playing pawn to d5. I and the reason this is an inaccuracy is because it's allowing black to move this knight and suggest to trade this very bad bishop that they have. Because you see here, I have like a bunch of wedges on light squares. This bishop is going to suck for the rest of the game, and if black can trade it, then that's going to be good. Now, that's not saying this bishop also isn't terrible, but if black can trade this bishop, that's a step in the right direction for them. Knight h4. Now, go off the rails a bit here because clearly I want to do this, but the bishop is just going to take. Maybe I was thinking that this would happen, and then I could like trade the queens and then go knight f5, but then it would pack a little bit less of a punch, right? Bishop takes, and b5. So, as you can see, the rating differential in this game, back then I was 1134, and this guy was 1300. And the fact that he played b5, I just kind of sat there and I was like, for real? Like, you're just gonna give me the a6 pawn? Like, this is going to be a walk in the park. Because now he's already under trouble. Like, I'm going to play bishop e3 and put pressure on this knight, which is pinned to an undefended rook on the back rank. So queen to d8 is played there, just adding extra defense on the rook. I go bishop to e3 anyway, hitting the knight, and he has to play c5, but come on, guys. I know you remember this. When a pawn goes up 2 squares and it's next to a pawn like this, the French move can be played, en passant. And even 2022 Hailey knew about en passant. Queen to c7, just adding another defender onto that knight and pressuring the pawn. Black is just in some massive, massive trouble. But I decide to take, which is a bit weird. What the computer's suggesting that I do here is actually just play a4 and just try to open up another line of attack onto that knight. Like, this is my win condition right now, is putting pressure on this knight, and a4 is the quickest way to accomplish that. And if takes, actually the best move here for black is to take the pawn. Because if bishop takes a7 were to happen, there's knight c5 hitting the queen and the rook, necessitating bishop takes c5, seemingly hanging the queen. Then rook takes a6, rook takes a6, and then if black takes, audience moment, what is a move that white can play to threaten checkmate? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is knight f5. And what this does is it takes away the king's final escape square for rook a8, right? Well, it doesn't threaten checkmate. There's still queen d8, but the point is it's either checkmate or losing your queen. And this takes away the two escape squares. Bishop takes a7. I convert and I just take this pawn. The reason I did that was because I just get a free pawn, and I'm up 3 pawns against a person who's almost 200 points higher rated than I am. So I was feeling pretty hype at this point. Maybe a little too hype, as you will see. Pawn to g6, he might be trying to activate his bishop, which I think is another poor decision, because what are you doing? Like, you're just looking at that pawn. Knight to d2. Maybe I'm trying to rotate over to c4, maybe b3. Like, there's a couple different squares the knight could go to. I could even like try to wrap all the way up here. It's like a bunch of different things. Bishop e7. And see, he just plays g6 and then develops the bishop over here. Like, why did you play g6? Why did you not just leave this fortification of pawns to castle over here? I just don't understand. Right? b4. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make progress on the queen side, because I have a bunch of pawns over here, and he has no pawns on the A, B, or C files. So this is going to be the way that I convert this position, right? So that's what I'm trying to do right now. He castles, and then instead of making progress with the A pawn, I try to make progress with the C pawn. And this is where the game took a big turn on its head, because audience moment, how can black trap my queen here? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is rook to b8, which he did play. And now my queen, if you'll notice, taken by the rook, rook, pawn, knight, rook, rook, pawn, pawn, pawn. The queen can't move. So it's trapped. And at the time, I kind of resigned myself to taking, right? But nowadays, if I somehow got myself into this position against the 1300, which is very unlikely, but if I got myself into this position, I would play a4. And here's why. Because after takes, you would take with the c pawn. And like I said about these pawns, this is actually not anything to sneeze at for black. Because if black is careless here, like I'm threatening a5 and b6 first of all. But if black is like careless here and tries to go and attack my knight, knight f5, right? Hitting this, pressuring that, king h7, takes, b6 here, a5. I don't care if you have all the queens in the world, who's going to stop this pawn stampede, right? So that is why in the modern day, if I got confronted with this position, I would play a4 to try to take and then push the pawn wall. Because like I said, it's my win condition. And a win condition in chess or anything else is basically something that, if accomplished, will lead to your victory. So getting that pawn wall moving would be my win condition. Queen takes b8, and now I'm just completely losing, with the only hope is making something move with these pawns, which is what I do here. Queen to b6, and now I try to make the comeback. I push this pawn up. I'm going to go knight to b3 and try to get some momentum over here. Queen to d4. This is a weird move because it just allows this knight, which I isolated on the side of the board, to reactivate and attack the queen, which is what I do. And as you will see here, white is still better if they play this correctly, despite black being up a queen, because knight to b3 and this pawn wall is so powerful that it's going to be, black has to be basically perfect to defend against this. Queen c5, and I play rook c1. Like, what is this move? Like, if you're going to defend this pawn with a rook, like, can you at least defend it with this rook so that this pawn doesn't get taken? Like, I mean, there is this small problem of knight g4, but I wouldn't have seen that back then. Anyway, rook c1, and then I play knight to b3, I move late, and now I take over the a file, but at the cost of losing one of my all-important queenside pawns. But the game goes on, right? At this point, I kind of sat here for a little bit. I sat here for about, a minute, and I was like, how do I get this knight into the game effectively? Right? Like, I have no forward moves over here. I can't go like this. If I go here, I'm just kind of looking at the other knight. Like, I don't want star-crossed knights here. That's kind of a burden. So, what do? I play knight e1. And the goal of knight e1 is to go knight c2, knight b4, and then I d5 and I a6. Right? That was my goal. And that is exactly what I do. After restricting this knight right here, actually there's like a lot of things that I could have done here. The computer, instead of f3 in this position, likes knight to d2. And it is due to this line. Queen b6, h3, just stopping the knight from going in. Queen c5, because like black has almost no moves besides just shuffling the queen around because these pawns are just so oppressive, right? Knight e3, just eye in the center. G5. If black plays g5, we get rook to a8 attacking the bishop. The bishop moves, trying to set up something that if the knight moved, they would take on f2. Rook b8 here. The knight attacks the queen moves. Rook takes b6, queen takes knight. This looks like an even material trade, but it's actually completely losing because you let the pawn push. You let the pawn push. That's just completely devastating here. Instead, black should go queen to e1 instead of even taking the knight. Here, queen takes f2, attacking this, and this is how they should gain their material back. But there's still knight f5 check from white. King h7, c7, and black actually has enough of an attack on this side of the board that the fact that this pawn can promote into a queen means nothing because of pawn to h4. And the reason why it means nothing is because white's pieces can not check the king. They just can't. Like if they go here, trying to take here, it's just completely losing. G3, right? G3 and mate in 1. Like, you don't wanna run into that. But none of that happened and I played F3. That's just part of the fun of analyzing chess games, is seeing what could have happened. Queen to b6 check, I go king f1 because I'm looking towards the end game here. And uh, in the end game, having your king isolated on this side of the board with the entire diagonal being cut off is just very unappealing. And I did not want to have to deal with that. Knight h5. So he's trying to get here, right? But I could have just played g3, but I'm too focused on this side of the board. I go rook a6 attacking the queen, knight b4, and I'm looking at my square and I'm gonna try to push this. I'm gonna try to play b6 and c7, knight d5. This is my goal here. Bishop c7. I play knight d5. The best move there was actually to start moving the king. Why? No clue. Why can't I just play this? Like if I play knight to d5, what's he gonna do? Knight f4, king e1, and then this, I guess. But knight takes c7, right? Yeah, so I take the bishop, and the queen is now the only thing on this side of the board that is defending the pawn push, right? So this is a good turnout for me. Knight a5, I'm trying to defend this pawn so that b6 can be pushed without the queen being taken, because after b6, the rook would not defend, so I need another defender, right? That was the goal of playing that. Knight e6, I play b6, he has to go back, and now all I had to do was play b7. And the reason that I had to play b7 was that, right, like if he played something like knight c7, attacking my rook, I could go rook b6, and everything is safe here. His pieces are just completely sequestered, trying to stop my promotion, and I could just go for something over here. I could just lock up this side of the board, and eventually he's going to have to move one of these two pieces and make a way for the pawns, right? That's kind of the way you win. You just win by being patient, by like exhausting all of black's resources so that they eventually have to make a move that hurts their position, right? But if c7 were to be played in this position, there's actually something severely, severely wrong with that move. And it's knight c7. It's knight c7. And if takes, yeah, this is not winning for white anymore. You could play this and just lose your knight, I guess, but, like, it's not, like, and there's also a check on the back of rank, which is actually completely losing, believe it or not, because after queen to f2, you cannot stop this pawn anymore, so you you shouldn't be, like, so anxious to give checks like that. But yeah, that's just a fun little thing that could have happened, but instead I played king to e2 because I decided now is the important time to get my king involved in the game. We get knight c5 attacking the rook, and I play c7. I play c7. Queen c8, and I go here. I'm just ever so slowly inching up my rook, inching up my knight to try to push these pawns towards the victory, right? Knight to d7, and I play b7. I come this far, and I play b7, completely giving up the pawn. What I should have done there was play knight to b7, attacking the d6 pawn, which is actually extremely hard to defend. If you try to go like queen f8 to guard the pawn, I have news for you, bud. Knight d8 and one of these pawns is getting through. Knight d8 and one of those pawns is getting through. But b7, I lose the pawn, and then I go king to d3, and I'm completely losing. Almost came back, but didn't quite. And after queen to b8, I get a new... Whoops, knocked down some stuff. I get a new invigoration because I have a move here that can guarantee the loss of their queen or the promotion. Audience moment, what is it? What move do I do to guarantee that they will lose their queen or let my pawn promote? And if you're able to figure it out, it's knight c6, attacking the queen, defending the rook, and if the queen moves, the pawn promotes. If the queen takes the rook, the pawn promotes. If the queen goes here, pawn promotes. Right. So if the queen takes the pawn, they lose it, right? Queen takes a7, knight takes, and he stops my promotion with a fork. And now we're at even material. So after all of that comeback, right? After all of that comeback, we are now in a completely deadlocked knight endgame, and it seems like my hopes for a comeback are out the window, right? But let's keep going. King to b4, right? We both try to get our kings involved in effective ways. I'm going to hit the knight and then walk towards this pawn. King e7. He's trying to run his king over here as well. Here, check. And now I make a very nice move here. For 2022 Hailey, this was a very nice find. Audience moment, what is a sacrifice that I can do to win a pawn? And if you're able to figure it out, it's knight takes pawn with a check hitting this, and then if takes, king takes. And what black should have done there, by the way, is just go king e6. Just take the pawn loss, force me to go back to c6, and your king is active, right? That's what black should have done, but they took, and now I'm completely losing because I'm just going to either play g4, lock the pawns up, or go here. And like I said before, he's just running out of moves. And I also have an f-pawn. I have a completely passed f-pawn, lest we forget that. F6, here I push, and then eventually I'm going to just dart over here. He's going to take my pawn, and I'm going to use that as an opportunity to just kill all of these. This is like an extremely easy king and pawn endgame to win. King e6, boom, boom, and at this point he resigns. And that, folks, was the April 14th, 2022 Immortal game. A game where I hung my queen in the early going, then I came back to be even, and then sacrificed a knight to gain back a knight and a pawn, and won the end game. And that was the Immortal game. But now we get in to the actual fun part of the video. Where are they now? So my opponent, of course, being Rudy Monti, I have a couple games pulled up here from them about how they've been doing in chess recently. This is from the modern day. This is like from like a week ago that they were playing these games. They are still, I believe they are still like very active on chess.com, but their rating hasn't changed at all. It's just always fun to look at it because like I was like 300 or 400 points lower rated than I am now, and this guy's exactly the same. I mean, I don't really know what to make of that, but I guess we'll see how he plays, right? And as you can see there, maybe not the world's best player, right? E4, E5. And this game turns into an Italian. We get bishop c5, which is the gioco piano. This is essentially like the very boring Italian game that like all people tell their kids to play when they're learning how to play chess. So like just put the bishop out, put the knight out, and just, hit the weak pawn over here, and this is what you're gonna do, right? Castle d6, just trying to open that bishop. I mean, there's a reason it's played a lot. It's really good fundamental opening. Like you're getting your pieces out, you're creating a good pawn chain, you're not blocking in your bishop at all. You're establishing control of the center. Like this is an extremely useful and like fundamentally sound opening. Pawn to c3, again, the same idea from earlier, trying to crack at the center. And in the Italian, you could actually do it both ways. You could do this and this. These are both effective in their own kinds of ways. Knight f6, attacking that pawn. Like you can see here, the Italian and the Spanish are pretty similar in regards to their ideas, but they are slightly different because the bishop in the Spanish is putting pressure on that knight, but in the Italian, it's putting pressure on this weak f7 pawn. Right. And there are a couple different moves that black could play here. Actually, one of them is queen to f6. Queen to f6 is actually an accepted move in this position. And the line goes like, because the idea is to just like further tamp down on d4, right? I'm not even sure if that's a word, tamp. E takes, c takes. And c takes is actually the wrong move. Remember what I said about this b4 idea? That's actually white's best move in this position. Because after bishop to b6, there's a4 trying to trap the bishop before you even try to take. And then a5, bishop to g5, queen g6, and e5. And white is actually fighting for the advantage in this line. It's just very, very, very funny. D takes, and then b5, just knocking away the defender of that, hitting the queen. It's crazy. Like, there's just so much tactical stuff that can happen. Like, here, you can't take this because of a fork, right? Oh, wait, never mind. That's not the right. Yeah, you just bishop takes d8. Right. Bishop takes d8, and if you take, there's knight e5, targeting this, and then everything is open, and it's just like, even though you're up a material, you're just completely lost. C3, bop, 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 bishop g4, and he plays a very early d4, which is not good in this case, because you can just take the knight and then take the pawn, and you've removed a defender of that center pawn. But black doesn't see that, and instead goes bishop back to b6, allowing white to have the center. Bishop g5, h6. He wants to hang around. This is actually a pretty annoying pin for black to deal with, but they're still doing fine. G5, they decide to get rid of it, but it does apply more pressure onto the center. I hope that black will notice that. They do, but they, notice it in a weird way. There's actually e5 here. Remember what I said about this rook being lined up against the king? This is why you don't push your kingside pawns and, stop castling or, leave castling until later in the game if you don't know exactly what you're doing, because stuff like this can happen. Like, you're going to get takes, you're going to get knight takes, setting up discoveries, right? Like, it's just going to get crazy. So, where was I? So e takes, and then we get queen to b3. The idea here is to target this as very single-minded, extremely single-minded. You can actually take on f3 here, because here king f8, there's no other attacks. Your bishop might get away, so you have to take the bishop, and white has nothing here. White just has a bishop that they need to make sure the queen still defends, and that's like more of a headache than anything. So queen to e7 here from black, just essentially trying to stop this as hard as they possibly can, and protecting f7. Knight takes d4. Knight takes, c takes. I don't know why black did that, because now look at this center. Like, this is a beastly center. Castles. Queen to e3. Yeah, I have one over here. Okay. Knight h5. Why? Like, what is this bishop doing that it is so urgent that you need to take care of it? It is looking at a pawn chain, good sir. I really don't know what you think that move is. Knight to d2. Like, white here is playing knight to d2. But, they're gonna go here, they're gonna go here. Like, why not just go here and then here? Like, this is the most obvious, like, plan of development for the c3 knight that you will ever see. And instead he goes knight to d2. Knight takes, and whoa! And white takes with the freaking f pawn. Why would white take with the f pawn? Oh my god! Now you've created this lineup, which if this pawn moves, that queen would just be toast. It's like a skewer, just a complete like shish kebab over here. You just voluntarily created that. Just f5, trying to just run it down mid, put the rooks behind. This is actually good opportunistic thinking by black based on that ridiculous move. But instead here, uh, instead of f5, the computer wanted black to go d5 because, mm, yeah, so the computer recommends d5 here, which gets us into some funky scenarios because bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, and if takes, queen e3, rook e3, there's bishop d4. This diagonal is deadly for white, which is why I am so perplexed as to why they did this. But f5, like, I understand this decision from black 100%. You're just trying to run it down mid, right? Queen f2. And if you don't understand, if you don't know, running it down mid is like a gaming term for just going for it. Queen to f6. We are double attacking that pawn and actually threatening to win the queen. h3. Yeah, audience moment. This one probably won't be too hard. How do you win a queen here for black? Yeah, yeah, bishop d4. Bishop d4 just wins the queen because you played f takes for some reason. Okay, rook e3, and actually that is not the right move. Essentially, what the computer wants black to do here is be like, you ain't moving this for the rest of the game, so I'm just gonna go here. I'm just gonna go here like an absolute animal, right? Here, here, put pressure on that. And white has to go knight f1 to further defend the rook, and you can't take because of the line up here. So black has to just get the bishop out of the way, and then there's just this. Like, this is just such a funny position. But bishop takes e3, I understand the instinct, but now some of the pressure has been, like, the pressure valve has been kind of uncorked a little bit for white, and white can kind of breathe a little bit. Queen takes b2. This is a horrible, horrible move because in doing this, you have opened up a line of attack on your own king, which is not what you should be doing when you're trying to attack someone else's king. Obviously, rook b1, queen back, and queen a7. So white thinks that they're attacking this pawn. Instead, they should have played bishop to d5. Just attacking this, and if c6 were to be played, then queen takes a7, sacrifice, I mean, not, that would be really silly, but sacrificing the bishop for queen takes b7 mate. But queen a7 here, black can find queen c5 to force trade the queens, and they are completely fine. But instead, we get bishop takes h3. Just absolutely wild, just bishop takes pawn, just out of absolutely nowhere. Um, you may be like, well, why is this not a good move? Well, because king to d7, and now the rooks are coming. It's not it's not as good here because there's nothing blocking this. It's not mate, right? So you should just well, if you take back the pawn, then queen to c5, again, force trades the queens, which is not good. So queen to b7, king d7, this, and black still has to be extremely careful here. King to e6 is a good move, just, staying around all your pawns. Bishop c4, like, white is trying their best to hunt the king, and I definitely don't fault them for that. King f6, right? This is queen to c7, and now you have this very sneaky threat on that f7 square. Queen to d4 check, trying to fork this, but actually king h2 is completely winning for white because now you're attacking the bishop with two pieces, and if the bishop moves, it's checkmate in two with queen f7. Audience moment, where's the mate? Where's the mate in one? And if you're able to figure it out, it's just moving up one square. That's checkmate. So we get rook here, trying to protect this, and then here trying to hit this and attack the king. This is just such an insane game. Meanwhile, the bishop has been hanging for like a gazillion moves. Bishop takes g2. Here, here, check. d5 is crazy clutch move five, crazy clutch find by black. Rook takes d5. We get a mass trade, and then another erroneous queen move, leading to this, which white plays, not even taking the rook, which the queen defends, going here. And you can't go up or here, so you have to go down. And then, because the king has to step, this is the only move for the king to step in the way, and then here, and the way diagonals work, the king can't even go up and protect the queen, so this is what would happen, but we don't get that. Instead, queen to g7, we get rook f6, which is the best move, but the response to that is just going to be, the correct response to that would have been knight c4 check, but instead we get queen to d6. And audience moment, where is the checkmate in one in this position? And if you're able to figure it out, just like Purple Cat Eye did, queen c3. Isn't it funny that this game that we just witnessed here by black is played by someone who was around my skill level in 2022, and now they are pretty much at that same exact skill level 2.5 years later. That just, like, it shows the importance of practice and improving at chess. That's really what it shows. Now I have a couple more games for you here. We have Rudy Monti has white against Derube from Uruguay, who is a 1426, and Rudy is just at their same rating of 1308. And we get pretty similar accuracy scores, so this one's probably also going to be pretty fun. E4, and we get an Italian, right? We get an Italian. Bishop E7, a very compact way to guard against this. The Hungarian defense is just essentially stopping all knight to G5s, delaying knight F6 until they see what white wants to do about this D pawn, basically. D3, H6, castles, and immediately we get a blunder. Immediately we get a blunder. Because there is a bishop sacrifice in this position. There's bishop takes F7. This is really hard to see. There's bishop takes F7, and if the king takes, then you take the pawn. Best move is king F8. And then if king F8, there's this. But about other moves, what if you go all the way up? What if you just attack the knight? Queen G4. And if you take the knight, there's mate in 2. Boom, boom. Brutal, right? But it's safe to say that Rudy did not see that bishop sacrifice and instead went bishop to e3, allowing their structure to be damaged, which black didn't do. Why did black go here if they weren't going to take when given the opportunity? I don't understand. Knight f6 instead, just developing the knight and attacking a pawn that's not even hanging, and also hanging this pawn and then not taking the bishop. I don't understand what's going on here. Knight takes e5, and also nifty little threat set up here, but you could just castle. Or can you? Or can you just castle? The computer thinks that this is actually winning for white because of e5. And if you play something like this, there's queen f3 hitting this and the king is too exposed and you can't defend it with anything because the pawn is still here. This is one of those very niche cases where you actually can sacrifice the 2 pieces for the rook and it actually works out, right? We have another line here, e5, knight d5, queen f3, boom, boom. Here, queen g7, c4, knight b6, king e5. Audience moment. Where's the maiden one in this position? This one's a bit harder to find. And if you're able to figure it out, it's f4. It's f4. Because the queen cuts off this entire rank. You can't go this way. Very nice mate there. But instead, after castles, we get bishop to d5. Like, White's thought process here was like, oh, I don't want this to happen because, these pawns are bad. I want to get taken by this knight instead and then double the pawns like this. I don't get that thought process. C6, instead of taking the bishop, this guy just has missed so many opportunities to take that dang bishop. Bishop to he's gonna get another chance. Instead, he goes d6, attacking the knight, allowing this again. But we get knight back to f3. I don't because like everyone teaches that you shouldn't go for this sacrifice, so I definitely don't blame him for that. Bishop g4. We ask where the bishop is going. Boom. Knight b82. Very normal stuff going on here. Knight takes b. Finally, he freaking takes d5, queen e1. Queen e1, I believe, was intended to just move out of the pin, but it's like a really clumsy way of doing that. This pin is not at all annoying because you are protected by a knight, so you could move this queen wherever you want, and you wouldn't be at risk of damaging your pawn structure. Queen e1, and this queen just has nowhere to go from the e1 square, period, anyway. Right? Takes. I probably would have considered taking with my knight here, but the computer likes the other one. Oh, actually, no, I wouldn't have because again this. But yeah, takes with the pawn b6, and he just goes up. He's like, I see a free pawn. I'm gonna go after the free pawn. Queen to c7 protects and attacks the knight. Are we gonna get bishop f4? No, we get knight back. I mean, at least maybe consider protecting the knight with another knight. I mean, in this case, knight c4 doesn't work because of b5, but your thought process should not go immediately to, I should just retreat this knight that I put up here. That's not what your thought process should go to immediately. It's kind of like a last resort. c5 is wild. opening up the diagonal and kind of freezing your pawn structure over here. E5, allowing the knight into the middle and hitting this. Knight e4. Knight e4 is actually not a bad move because we are looking at that d6 square. We have a good outpost there. That's going to be very hard for black to deal with. Knight to b4, attacking the pawn and threatening a fork. Are we going to see it? Yes. Queen to c3. There's that. Boom, boom. The rook lines up. And actually, there's a sacrifice here. Takes, 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 hitting the bishop. And if the bishop goes to g6, then we utilize that d6 square and we play this. And the best move is this, because if black does nothing, we're going to get f4, f5, and it's over. Like, it's legitimately over after f5. So black needs to be on guard for that. But instead we get queen back to e1. Like, this queen has done some mad shuffling, right? Like, queen c3, queen d2, queen e1, queen e2, just hanging the knight, which is taken. Queen to g4, knight takes e3, takes with the knight, bishop g6. Now I would expect this pawn, or maybe this pawn, to start launching. We get that. h5, move back, boom, boom. All right, we're making some good progress. Bishop to h7. Audience moment. What is the best way to attack the king here? This is a very broad one, so it might take you a while to figure out, but what is the best way to attack the king in this position? What move? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is pawn to f6. Utilizing this pin, of course, threatening a mate, and the bishop can't block this. And you're hitting the bishop, so you're just going to lose the bishop. You have to play bishop g6 and lose the bishop. That's what has to happen there. Pawn to c4, boom. We get that, and then the rook sacrifice by black. This rook sacrifice by black, and the point of that rook sacrifice was if the queen just shifted over to b7, we would get pawn to e6, just locking up these light squares, and then maybe something like, here and here. Just these light squares would just absolutely be, like, very deadly here. But rook takes d5 is such a great move because you're just like, all right, I'm up 2 points of material, so I'm going to sacrifice a rook to just take this and completely have very easy targets for the rest of the game, right? This is an incredible move by black. C takes d5, queen e5. This is incorrect because actually you can trade the queens and you now have a threat. So black didn't simplify this in the right way because now they still have this pawn to deal with. G4, weird move. Bishop d6, blockading and protecting looks like a good move, but it just hangs a7, which is taken. C4, B takes c4. Audience moment. What is the move? This is going to be another broad one. What is the move that black played that made white resign in this position? And if you are able to figure out resignable moves in this position, the answer is bishop c5. Boom, ba-boom, and it's over. All right. Yeah, I'm just going to show you this one because I actually have a game that I want to show you that I played today. So we're just going to not show you that last one, and we're going to show you the game that I played. But what? Yeah, we can still show you this one. Looks like a bit of a better accuracy from both sides. We still have standard rating from Rudy Monti. It's crazy. Like, they've been in this range for all of their games. That's kind of funny, actually. So e4, tried and true e4 player, knight f3, d5. We get the elephant gambit. And when confronted with new gambits like this, players like Rudy often struggle a little bit. So let's see how he, walks this terrain. E takes d5, queen takes d5, and I was ready to compliment him, okay? I was ready to compliment him for giving up a center pawn for the case of developing with tempo. But of course, he just gave up a center pawn and then played d3, blocking in his own bishop. So not only did he broke like two of like the greatest sins in chess, in my opinion, like Hailey's greatest chess sins. Giving up a center pawn and blocking in your bishop. Oh my god. Okay, so And then black decides to just like, okay, I'm gonna attack that pawn. Like I'm just gonna go after it. D takes, queen e2, and bishop f5. This is just such a funny looking game. And queen to b5 would be a good move if this queen wasn't pinned. Instead, we get queen takes, bishop takes, and hopefully knight c3. No, we just get bishop e2. We don't develop with tempo at all. We just go bishop e2, right? We just bishop takes two. We just blunder a pawn. You know that's how it be sometimes. Castles, knight to d7, knight c3. Now we're developing without tempo. Like, huh? Knight g to f6, preventing any of this. Maybe he could still try knight b5, which is actually not a bad move. The computer actually recommends that you play knight b5 because if black stops this, there's still like knight d4 ideas. Bishop g5 here, rook a to c1, bishop g6, knight b5, and a6. This is actually an incredibly bad move because you have left the c7 pawn hanging. Audience moment, which piece should take that pawn? And there is a clear right answer here. And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is the knight. If I can click correctly. The answer is the knight. Because you set up discovery threats, right? And if you take with the rook, once the king moves, this knight is under attack. And the knight is the only defender of the rook. So if the knight moves, the rook is unprotected. So the best move is to go here. And then this, and then bishop f4. This is just extremely, extremely anxiety provoking to play like this. I would not recommend it. Knight b5, a6, we get knight takes. So Rudy makes the right decision here. After rook takes, boom, rook d1, boom, and then bishop f4. Yeah, that was the one I just showed you. Um, King to b8, bishop f4. So Rudy plays bishop f4 anyway, setting up another way to set up discovery threats on this king. So he can't go here or here, and then if he goes here, he could get checked at some point. So this king is in a real, real bad spot right now. King a7, rook f to d1, bishop to c5. We're just activating that bishop, right? Knight to d5. Not entirely sure why that was played. I don't really know why you would be engaging in a trade like this when you are attacking. Like you're pressuring the king. You shouldn't be engaging trades right now. Takes. Bishop, like black is just extremely solid. Like white has no attack anymore. What are they going to do? Like throw these pawns at him? Like there's so many things that black can do to stop that. We double up, and black doesn't care because they make their own threat. King f1 protects it. Boom, boom, boom. We just get a bunch of trades, and now we're in a minor piece endgame. 95, boom. Takes the bishop. We hit the pawn. And now we start pushing erroneously, because now this bishop c4 can be played, and if something like this happens, we get stuff like bishop here, we get stuff like bishop f7, and these pawns start dropping like flies. The double bishops are really annoying to deal with in an endgame like this, especially when you have such a terrible pawn structure like this. Like this looks like such an innocuous position. It's just like, okay, we have two minor pieces each, so it's going to be a draw, but no, it's not going to be a draw. You have to be incredibly careful that you don't just lose all these pawns and allow these to promote. Bishop c4, knight b6. We pin the knight, but that's really nothing to worry about at all for black because we've got the bishop defending and the king defending. Bishop f6, b3. And now, of course, we're trying to get the king active. White, for some reason, just decides to give up the dark squared bishop. Just instead of like, going here maybe. White is just like, you know what? Here, take it. And let's go into an opposite colored bishop's endgame, which is notorious for usually being a draw. That is just an incredibly poor decision by white. King f3. Just getting texts. And we take, and take. White is up a pawn, but doesn't matter. Like, unless white can get past this and, like, ensure one of these is promoting, because both of these pawns are promoting on the color of the bishop, which is really bad if you're trying to win an opposite colored bishop endgame. So if white can somehow get this pawn and then get both of these pawns down here where it's impossible for the bishop to stop him, Like, and it's gonna be a draw unless that can happen. Bishop takes f2, right? And then this happens, boom, boom. This is looks like it's just going to be a draw, right? Like we're just shuffling around. The kings move like this, and we get a draw. So, I'm not trying to include like all fantastically crazy games here. I'm just trying to give like a good idea of where these people are at in their chess journey 2.5 years after they played that game against me. And what we conclude here is that this guy has been playing pretty, it's like semi regularly, but he's still at the same skill level. He's still at the same skill level that he was at when I played him, which kind of indicates that he doesn't practice a lot. But now, moving on from that, last game I wanted to show you in this video is this game right here. Now, if you've been watching my videos, you will know that I have a very uh, strong attachment to this one particular line of the Vienna, which goes e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, right? And most people in the clubs or like online play knight f6, d6, one of these moves that discourages the queen move. But in this game that I played today, we actually got bishop c5. And I was able to play queen to g4, queen f6, and knight to d5. This is known as the Meitner-Mies's gambit, and this is like literally my favorite line in all of chess because it is so like really like unbelievably hard for black to come out of this alive unless they know exactly what they're doing. So the best move is queen takes f2. And a lot of people pre-move mate here because they think it's just mate, but then I just take with the bishop. So every time this happens, I'm just like having my hand on the bishop ready to take that queen when it goes down there. But not a lot of people do it. And the idea is that I just have a lot of other threats that I'm preparing. Also, knight h3 is an idea. So the best move is king to f8, and then white plays knight h3. And black has a choice of either going queen to d4 immediately or playing h5 themselves, looking for a trade of queens. Then white would go here and queen to d4. Audience moment, how do you trap the queen in this position? It's really not that obvious. Like, how do you prepare to trap the queen in this position? And by trap the queen, I don't mean like threaten it and it can't move. I mean like just imprison it in a in on that square where it can't go anywhere else. And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is d3. And that queen can't go anywhere. And c3 is just being prepared because if you play c3 right now, you just lose the bishop. So d3 is necessary. But that is only if they play king f8. If they don't play king f8, they're just completely lost. Like knight f6, you take this, you hit this and this. Actually, this is a fun line because of this. There's just that, right? And yeah, after that, there's just knight h3, boom, 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 boom. You have to find king of fate or you're completely losing. Like, this is just something that you have to know if you're black, if you go into it. But bishop takes f2 because I think black in this game knew that about this line. So they're like, I'm going to trick her by going bishop takes f2. But I just go here because I didn't like the idea of stepping in front, creating discovered threats. So I go king to d1, and he plays queen to d6. And how do I, it's this one's pretty simple. How do I win a rook in this position in 2 moves? There's 2 ways. And if you're able to figure it out, it's either queen takes and then knight c7, or knight c7, queen takes, and then knight takes rook. The computer, for whatever reason, thinks that this is an inaccuracy and this is the best move, even though they both lead to the same exact position. Like, look, I'm just clicking between the 2 lines here. They both lead to the same exact position, but the computer thinks that this is an inaccuracy. Like, can you explain that to me? Like, can you just can you let me can you let me have my fun and not take points off? Come on, like I just don't understand the computer sometimes. Bishop takes g1. This move I was happy to see because it helps my rook actually get activated over here. But my opponent gives me more than enough reason to get excited after this because he just plays f6. Boom, gone. Knight to d4, c3. I'm just attacking the knight and then I'm building up a center. Knight to b5, boom. And like you can see here, the power, if someone is unprepared in this line, I'm just up 6 points of material from opening knowledge alone. This wasn't skill. This was just memorization of the lines. And he could have done that too if he knew to play King of Fate. Like he could have done well there. Knight to d6. So this is real. This game, like, I'm not really too proud of the 91 accuracy. It's just that I knew the opening and he didn't. Like, I just wanted to show this game to like just show you guys that I'm not crazy. That this line is actually a lot of fun to play, and that is why I hope for it every time I play the Vienna. F5 takes. And this game actually comes to an end very quickly. Bishop to d5. I reposition my bishop and attack that rook. It moves, opening up this check for the bishop. The king should have gone to e8 to avoid the mate, but instead we get knight e7 blocking. Audience moment. What checkmate in one did black blunder by playing knight e7? And if you're able to figure it out, checkmate. That's just checkmate. Because this is covered and the knight covers that. Bishop, bishop, right? Everything is just pointing at the king. And that was the game that I wanted to show you. That is the true might of the Meitner Mises Gambit of the Vienna opening. And with that, folks, I have been the amazing Hailey, and I will see you in the next video.